Hello, everyone. Dr. J here. Super excited to bring you this interesting podcast, unique podcast. I don't think anybody's doing anything like this. And it's DNA consulting. And that's what I do every day. I have crazy, interesting conversations with people. And there's so many days I sit there and think, man, I wish I had that on record. I talked recently to a guy in Africa who's in an anti-poaching unit in Africa. Like, they protect white rhinos and elephants and things like that. I mean, super interesting. Not only that, people have really interesting health issues, and there's stuff that you can learn from. You know, it's not like it's custom to that person. It's things that are basic and principles that other people can learn from. So it illustrates the power of understanding your genetics. It also illustrates the limitations or potential limitations of DNA. Can't tell you everything. And so I think hopefully I'm providing some value there. And literally anybody can sign up through ajconsultingcompany.com, through my website. I also started a Patreon page specifically for this podcast. It's patreon.com/AnthonyGJ. Jay is the last name. That really helps. And it's also important because I want to start another podcast, which I described there. It has to do with fish. So check that out. And I also included a free video on that Patreon page. I produced it personally, and it's me shooting fish. I got the kids involved. My wife is there. She shot her first fish ever with a bow and arrow, so it's pretty awesome. Definitely worth checking out just for that. Check out that Patreon page. Again, Anthony G.J. And the website is AJ Consulting Company. All
Perfect.
right.
And so we are good on our end.
Yeah, thanks.
We're ready to roll.
Right, thanks for doing this. This is crazy. So how's things on your end? Lockdown going on?
Not as bad as most places here. It's taken a lot easier just here with the family.
Yep.
It's really not been that big of a deal here. So we've been able to handle it, and it's been nice having, spending time with the kids and Andrea and really enjoying it.
Right, and you guys are in Canada?
No, we're down in Phoenix.
Arizona. Yep.
Yes. So being down here, I don't know, it's a little bit more relaxed, and we're dealing with what it is. We'd love to see everything get back going, but we're dealing with it to where we're at.
Right. Yeah, same here. Actually, when it snowed in Minnesota in April, I said, I'm getting out of here, and I actually left and took the whole family down to Mississippi. We just drove down.
Ooh, how long of a drive was that?
18 hours. Not fun. I did it in 2 days, though. I didn't do it in a straight shot. I've done the straight shot thing before with the kids. It's not worth doing. So, we got a hotel somewhere halfway down, and, most of the states between Minnesota and Mississippi, they're not at all locked down. But of course, once we got down there, it was pretty amazing because the weather was awesome. My buddy owns an Airbnb on the beach. So we were literally staying on the ocean. And he obviously nobody's at his Airbnb. It's a super nice place. He's got a boat. It's got twin 225s on the back.
Ooh, that's nice. That's living it up in style.
Yeah, jet skis, the whole thing. And what I discovered actually is flounder at nighttime. You can go and, this fish called a flounder. It's like brown on one side and white on the other side. You can actually go out at night and spear these things. So we did this.
Ooh, spear them.
Yeah, you have they call it gigging. And it's basically just a stick with a sharp point on the end. And you just walk around in the sand. And man, I'd never even heard of this. And we spent loads of nights doing that, and fishing. And the kids got all involved. So we had quite a good time, a lot of sunshine. And then, of course, I had to drive over to Covington, Louisiana.
Yes. Why per se were you in Covington?
Yeah, right. Well, it's funny because I went to Top Velocity, of course, Brent Porsow, a good friend of both of ours. And I walked in the door. I've never been down there. I mean, we've done podcasts and things together, but walk in the door and there's your jersey right when you walk in. I think it's, the first one he's got on the wall. He's got a whole line of pro baseball jerseys, and you've got the autograph on it and everything. So it was great talking to him, great meeting him.
It's a great facility. They had it. It wasn't quite the same when I was down there training, so it was a little bit more. Well, actually, I think we saw 3 different iterations of his facility when I was down there, and this one is beautiful. This whole new setup in Covington and Tallahassee, he does Brent Porcio does an amazing job with the athletes and the training down there. And, he's the one that really got me into, along with my wife, got me into understanding my body and trying to look more deeper into who I am and what makes me work. And Brent all the time was pounding in my head, pay attention to your body, like listen, find out as much as you can find out. And obviously through Brent and through listening to you guys talk on your on one of the podcasts is how we got connected.
Right.
And
right.
That facility down there is a breeding ground for stuff like this and wanting to get better, and that's why I'm here. I want to get better.
Right. I appreciate it. And then of course you were pro baseball player, pitcher. And
yes.
we've done Andrea's DNA a couple weeks ago. Good to talk to you, by the way, Andrea. I know you're there.
Thanks. Good talking to you again too.
Yeah, we had loads of fun, obviously, and it sounds like you guys have. I've looked at your DNA, and I'm comparing both of your reports. It sounds like you both have your reports up, but quite different DNA in respect to athletic genes.
Oh God!
But
I even looked. Okay, so. I haven't really even dove into it yet. I've been wanting to hear it firsthand.
Right.
There was only, I will say this, there was one thing I wanted to know. Only one thing that I wanted, I cheated and checked it out. And yes, I have it. The same thing as her, the pain sensitivity.
Stronger muscles?
No. I'm looking for the pain sensitivity. So she always said, I have no, I'm always whining about pain. I'm like, Andrea.
Isn't that funny?
When I actually say it hurts, it's serious.
Yeah.
And I got it.
I want to hear your comment. I want to hear your comment about athleticism, because if we talk about all the sports that we play against one another, besides me not being able to throw a ball 100 miles an hour, I've beaten him at every single thing we've done.
Okay, first of all, that is not totally true.
Yeah,
not everything.
right.
But I'll say this. I know for a fact at the end of the day, if she was a dude, she'd beat me in pretty much everything.
Yeah.
She is a better athlete than me. So when you take away power and you take away some of these things, she kicks my ass.
Dang.
But obviously, once you add the power and all that fun stuff, I obviously win. But I have an advantage.
Sure.
But when you take that away, we go bowling, we go basically everything.
Yeah.
Pop a shot, bowling. What else?
Mini golf.
Oh yeah.
Mini golf. What did I just beat you recently in pickleball, tennis?
Okay, first of all, pickleball, we're even right now because she did beat me the first game. I'll give her that, and then I came back and beat her.
That's not fair. I had
hilarious.
one of the kids on my team, so.
I don't even know what pickleball. I've never even played pickleball. I don't even know what it is. It just sounds ridiculous.
It's basically like a Florida, Arizona mini tennis.
Okay.
But with a wiffle ball. You play with a wiffle ball and paddles.
Okay. Sounds
It's
cool.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the one with the birdie?
Oh, badminton.
Yeah, badminton. I mean, I'm not a huge badminton player, but I got into that at one point in a swimming pool with a friend of mine. I used to go over to his place, before I was married, and we'd play badminton every couple days, and in his pool. It was amazing. It sounds so nerdy, right? And so silly, like wiffle ball or badminton, those little birdies, but it was so much fun.
Oh, yeah, it's a blast. Dude, look into pickleball. It's a lot of fun.
I'll have to check it out, yeah. Well, I mean, the pain sensitivity gene, obviously, just to jump way ahead, you guys both have the same version of that gene, and it's rare. It's really rare, and it's linked to extremely low sensitivity to pain. So basically, you guys, neither of you feel pain the same way that most people feel it. Right?
Interesting. So is that guaranteed that both of our kids get it?
Correct. Yeah.
Nice.
So, and
We've actually always wondered that because I think we said it when we were talking, both of our kids don't really answer to pain that much. Neither one of them.
Right.
The one is more emotional than the other, but the one holds his emotions in. But they're the same emotionally, just one wears it on his sleeve.
Right.
The other one doesn't. But when it comes to pain, they're the same. And Andrew and I are the same way, where I wear my emotions on my sleeve. She holds it in, but pain, I've always told her all along, she goes, "Oh no, you're such a wimp." I'm like, no. Whenever I complain, I end up actually being hurt.
Right.
So I've always known it. Now it's nice to know that she has to know it. She has to admit it, which is yes.
That's fun. Yeah, it's there. You guys have the same gene, and it's rare, which is really cool, you know. And
That is cool.
The only
That's
risk
neat.
with that gene, of course, is that sometimes you don't feel pain, right? Because you have such a low pain sensitivity. You don't feel it until you blow out your knee or something crazy happens. You know, so most people...
Yeah, or my hip, because I
Yeah.
blew my hip out, basically,
Right.
and had major hip surgery, and that's how I ended up at, that was the triggering point where actually got me to Top Velocity and finding Brent. That was the first thing that really happened.
Wow.
Up until then, everything in my career was going really well. I had a couple little injuries before that, but that was the first major injury, and it blew out, and I kept pitching on it. And I know for a fact I did a lot more damage because I kept pitching for probably a month on it.
Wow.
And and I do remember other points in times where trainers and coaches would tell me there's no way I'd be able to play the next day, and I would. I just
Yep.
I felt fine. Like, it didn't really bother me.
Well, you had a super long career too. I mean, obviously you have a Wikipedia page, so it's easy for me to look up. And you were on the Yankees, right? You were on the Red Sox, which I love because I lived in Boston for 10 years. You were on the White Sox, both the Sox. I mean,
Both Sox.
tons of teams. I mean, how many years did you play ball professionally?
I ended up playing, God, what was it? I think 14 or 15 professional years for 14 teams.
Wow.
So I always run through this list. This is what, like, whenever we're at a party, whenever we're meeting somebody new, they always want to know what the list is.
Sure.
So I've got to, like, memorize.
Right.
So it's Giants, Cubs, White Sox, Red Sox, Mariners, Yankees, Marlins, Mets. Okay, then it gets a little trickier here. Then it's the Indians.
Dodgers.
No,
Cardinals.
Indians, Cardinals, Dodgers, Braves, Blue Jays, and then I played 1 year of independent ball
Damn.
with the Long Island Ducks. I got to make sure to throw some love out there to the Ducks.
Yeah, well, you threw
Everyone
love
out in Long Island.
You pretty much threw love to the whole country right there. Everybody's going to be your fan.
And well, that's the thing. So I met Andrea when I was in Chicago with the Cubs, and so while I got to experience pretty much every corner of the U.S., so did she, because she was always there with me, like right by my side, supporting me most of the time. The other time, kicking my ass. If she wasn't supporting me, she was kicking my ass. And then, and so we'd gotten to experience every corner of the country together. And I got one son born in Seattle, one born down here in Phoenix, and so they've gotten to experience every corner. And now I'm with the Blue Jays, and they get to come out to Florida when we're going down there.
Yeah. So you're working in the front office now. And by the way, you had a podcast that was a smash hit as well. And how many years ago did you do that? And how long did you run that?
I ran the podcast. Me and James Koulianos ran the podcast. It was the Bullpen with DA. We ran it for about, I believe, a year and a half. Nice. Ended up actually doing really, really well with it. But unfortunately, when I took the job with the Blue Jays, they did ask me to stop because I was starting to be privy to some information that would be interesting on a podcast. Every now and then you might slip or something, but also it was just a matter of focusing on the new job, the new career, and the transition. And I understood it. I wasn't necessarily happy and excited about quitting the podcast. I really loved it and loved doing it with James. But, there was a transition point, and I think for both of us, that was that moment. And to be honest, once I took the job, I quickly realized I probably wouldn't have had time to have a podcast.
Right. Yeah, it's more time consuming than people realize. And I'm finding that out as I go along.
Well, I give James a lot of credit. Like, he killed it as a producer, and so he did a lot of the work. And even from my end, it took a lot of time, and I had the lightest load. So like neither one of us now would probably even be able to think to do it. Right.
Well, let's actually start with your gym section, as long as we're kind of at the pain tolerance section on the PDF. And obviously
working my way down there.
Yeah, because you're a professional baseball player, we might as well just start with the athletic genes, if you don't mind. I mean, I know I'm going out of order there.
No, let's do this. I'm excited. Like, I've actually been dying to see this, but I do see there's a whole lot of stuff on there that just popped up. So
yeah, well, I mean, and obviously I gave you the background because you were there in the room when we talked to Andrea a few weeks ago. And so, I'll briefly, I guess, go over the backdrop again a little bit, but, I won't belabor it because you guys both have a pretty good idea what's going on here, but we have 2 copies of DNA in every cell in our body, except egg and sperm cells, right? Egg and sperm cells only have 1 copy of DNA. So when they fuse together, that's where you get the copy from your mother, the copy from your father. Do you remember this whole spiel?
Yep.
Yeah, and then
Yes.
and it's also where you get the plus plus or plus minus thing. So the plus plus in this case means you got a bad version of the gene from your mother and a bad version from your father generally. And the reason I'm looking for bad genes is because you guys both have thousands of good genes, but I only want to find the bad ones and then figure out what's the actual root cause and then figure out how to fix it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, in the gym section, there's an exception to that because this first gene that comes up under the muscle types, ACVR1B, that's actually a good gene. So I kind of broke my own rule there, talking about how I only focus on bad genes, and then right off the bat I have a good gene. But that's just
Now,
because
why?
it's because it's a rare gene that actually means something for your training. And in your case, it means you have more muscle strength per volume of muscle. So it doesn't surprise me, right? Most pro athletes I talk to have this gene. And in other words, if you have the exact same size muscle as somebody else, you'll actually be stronger than they are.
Really?
And your kids have this too, by the way, because Andrea had this one as well.
Did you really? That's
Yep.
pretty cool.
Yeah, I've got her report right in front of me. So she had this one, but then she had a number of additional slow twitch muscle.
She gave me the suck it gene right there. So,
Well, where you guys differed in terms of your muscle fiber types is she had the slow twitch fiber types and a couple of additional rare endurance genes that you don't have. So, she's more in the endurance category, but she did get this one plus plus. So your kids all have this additional strength per volume of muscle, which is an advantage,
that's great. Good for them.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Thank your parents, I guess. But then, of course, the inflammation, like the joints, is where you light up quite a bit. And, it's pretty impressive that you had such longevity with all these genes that give you risk for joint inflammation, although most of them are related to carbs. Did you eat low carb when you were actually pitching?
Actually, until I got to top velocity in 2015, I didn't really pay attention to my diet. I ate like crap.
Yeah.
I always took pride in being able to eat like crap, but I also had a really fast metabolism.
Right, you're working
But
out
again,
hard.
I wasn't training the same. Like I wasn't training to build muscle at that point at all. Then later on, once I started really focusing on my body, I started cutting carbs more, and now I try to stay away from carbs as much as I can, but I still enjoy them.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the key. I think if you actually get joint pain, most of these genes, certainly these HLA genes, that long list of HLA genes, they're all triggered by high insulin. So if you get joint pain, drop the carb numbers. And of course, when you're working out, you can get away with more carbs because you're burning them, so your insulin's not spiking up. Mm-hmm.
Is there a difference between complex or simple carbs for him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because like sugar, of course, is going to spike your insulin a lot faster than complex carbs.
Yep.
So in reality, those HLA genes, because they're triggered by high insulin is the real thing, the real metric that you're looking at, right? So high blood sugar is usually an indicator of high insulin, but not always. It depends on, what you're doing, how much muscle mass you have, all this kind of thing.
I definitely have like a sweet tooth. So this is...
Yeah.
I don't like you already. I liked you at first.
Right, with the good muscle genes.
With a good muscle, I don't feel the pain. Now I'm not such a big fan.
Yeah,
so basically what you're saying is the insulin, the high sugar for me is leading to inflammation in general in my joints.
Correct. You got it.
I'll say this straight up, like overall playing, I was always the guy that had to recover more. I was the one that was always icing, ice tubs. I've had joint issues. I had a major hip surgery where I had to have my femur shaved, or my head of my femur shaved. I had my entire, my hip was all messed up. And then I ended up having groin issues. I've had elbow surgery. At the very end of my career, I had a shoulder surgery, but that was totally unrelated to actually pitching. So it's one of those things that, yeah, this is something I wish I would have known. My career might have been different.
Right. Or at least you wouldn't have had to get all that reconstruction on your hip, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, and it's interesting too. We'll talk about it in the diet section later, but I feel like you probably have some gluten sensitivity issues as well, particularly as you age.
Don't tell my wife that. Now she's smiling. She's excited. Now I'm entering her world.
Well, yeah, she definitely has them, right? Like we talked about last time, but you know, I was surprised to find some of those genes with you as well. But, you know, like I said before, if you've got more muscle mass, if you're working out harder, you know, which you were obviously doing throughout all those years, playing baseball, and it sounds like you're still keeping up on it, right? I mean, you're still training pretty heavy.
Yeah, I'm actually training very heavy. Every day, generally 6 days a week, maybe even 7 days a week. I've always recovered really well, but I do have joint, especially hip issues. You know, that's something I'm always on top of having to take care of.
Yeah. The thyroid is an interesting gene, that DIO2 gene that comes up, which is actually on the next page. And that one, it leads to additional risk for joint, issues, joint injury, specifically osteoarthritis. Do you know the difference between osteo and rheumatoid arthritis?
Why don't you enlighten me, please?
What's that?
Well, yeah, just let me know. I really have no idea. I was trying to really fancily say I have no idea what that is.
Oh, sorry. I just didn't hear you. No, I mean, osteo and rheumatoid, I actually didn't know either until I went to Mayo Clinic and started working with these orthopedic surgeons, because, they both sound pretty much the same. They're both a form of arthritis. But rheumatoid is when your immune system attacks your joints. And again, that's that inflammation that we just talked about with the carbs in your case and the insulin. Osteoarthritis, it's actually different. It's when your soft tissue just kind of degrades over time. So instead of having soft tissue between your bones, you end up with bones rubbing on bones, and that hurts like hell. Again, with your pain tolerance, it probably doesn't, but for most people it does. So with this DIO2 gene, if your thyroid hormones are suboptimal, meaning if your thyroid hormones are low, if they're off, then you have a higher risk of osteoarthritis, that whole bone rubbing on bone situation. And usually when you're younger, that one doesn't really come up, but as you age, everybody's thyroid hormones decline. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So you want to keep tabs on those. It's plus gene. I always recommend taking iodine as well. I probably recommended that to you as well, right, Andrea?
Yep.
I mean, I don't remember for sure, but yeah. I mean,
Well, I'm on thyroid, so I have Hashimoto's.
right.
So, yeah.
Even more so.
Yep. I take selenium with iodine.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think you should take that as well, David. Just to, again, keep those thyroid hormones. It's a building block for the thyroid hormones, so you might as well give your body the building block so you can make plenty of thyroid hormone to prevent that, that bone-on-bone stuff, the osteoarthritis.
Okay, so you're suggesting iodine and selenium?
Yeah, selenium, you could go either way. And you know what's funny? Speaking of selenium, it triggered a memory. So I was just talking to somebody about chromium, which is a different micronutrient, and apparently a lot of people with a sweet tooth, if they take, it's actually an indicator of chromium deficiency, and if you take a chromium supplement, it immediately goes away.
Really?
Yeah, and I did some research on it. That's
legit.
legit.
I like it.
Well, yeah, it totally up to you in that situation, but if it's damaging your joints, in any way, right, or causing you trouble, I'd try that because it's kind of a cool little trick. And I did some research on it. It's legit. It's not like some wives' tale. It was actually a legitimate thing. So I'm always learning from people, when I talk to people with this.
And what is the chromium? Is that for joints, you said?
Well, no, just for sweet tooth. Well, for David, it would be
sweet tooth.
joints. Yeah, because
Gotcha.
if he's eating too many sweets, it would ultimately, be a joint issue. And again, you're pounding the weights 6 days a week. You're burning a lot more carbs than most people. So quote unquote low carb for you is different than somebody who's sitting in an office all day and then watching Netflix all evening, right?
Yeah, it's a little different, but I try to time it. So take it in the morning if I'm going to take carbs in the morning before I'm super active. And
Sure.
yeah, it's if I'm not going to be active that day, I really try to watch the carbs, unless it's like a random at night hanging out with friends, have pizza type of thing.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. And then you have a plus ITGAV, which indicates, exercise really important to get blood flow in and out of your joints. Obviously you're exercising. I'm not worried about that. Have you ever had low back issues?
No, actually very strong low back.
Good. Yeah. One of the big shifts for me, I used to throw my back out every year, and I may have told you guys this story when I was talking to Andrea, but, what really fixed it for me was deadlifting, because it strengthened up my low back. And of course, all the doctors were telling me, no, you can't deadlift, you've got a bad low back. And I never learned
the opposite.
Yeah. I mean, do you do clean snatching and all that stuff like Brent Porsout, or was that pretty much in the past now with your, now that you're not actually actively pitching?
No, I got into it when I was down there, and I've stayed into it. Actually, today I began the process to get USA weightlifting certified. So today was actually the first day I ever did any snatches. And so I was working on snatches actually probably half hour before the call.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I was excited.
Awesome.
It was the first time I've never done it, especially with baseball. It's one of those lifts that is a questionable lift for your shoulder, and so it's never one of those things I've ever done. I always wanted to try it. So today is day number 1. So when I'm in the Olympics in 4 years doing the snatch and the clean and jerk, you'll remember this day.
Oh yeah. Well, it'll come down in history. You heard it here first, right? Well, Andrea, have you ever done that? I mean, my wife, I got her deadlifting too, and it's been phenomenal for her. Have you ever at least deadlifted, or do you just stick with your endurance training?
No, I do deadlifts. I actually I started doing, super light, but clean and jerks, clean and snatches, those type of things. But I have to actually, my back bothers me. I actually have to deadlift a couple reps before I do that every set.
Right.
So just to get my back moving.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that it definitely has helped. And the other thing that I've noticed that helps is I've always done this. I always walk around with my core flexed all day long.
Nice.
And it's to strengthen my core, yeah.
Right. And then you don't put so much pressure on your discs. Yeah. That's good. I mean, it's funny, when I started deadlifting, it was like the first time I could actually flex my low back muscles.
That's
like my low lats and stuff. Yeah, because I'd never learned, you learn about the bench press like everybody else and all that stuff, the squat, but yeah, I feel like I really missed out, and I'm glad you're doing it as well, Andrea, because I think there's kind of a stigma for women. I mean, number one, it's called a deadlift, so it sounds intimidating, but then number two, women think they're going to get all big and beefy and all that sort of thing, but in reality, my wife's pretty slender and she does deadlifting, and I think it's phenomenal for men and women,
Oh, absolutely. I was going to say, David used to come and work out with me way back in the day. And whenever he would do legs with me, he hated it. And he's like, I'm not working out with you anymore. And so I had actually originally pushed him into working out with a gentleman named Keith down at Physio or Pro Advantage. Yeah. And so that's how he ended up getting into it.
Nice.
But yeah, I've been working out and doing that stuff forever. I started in 8th grade.
Wow.
My whole goal was to be able to, I played softball, basketball, and volleyball. And I was a back row specialist, but my goal was to get up and be able to spike the ball in the front row.
Yeah.
So that's when I started working out.
Right. Squatting helps too, that vertical jump.
Yep.
Which I'm sure obviously you've been doing that too. What's really cool with the squatting, I watch my kids, and when they're 2 years old or whatever, and they're just squatting down to pick things up, it's amazing how perfectly they squat, because their hips are so open.
Yep. Yeah.
I actually intentionally teach them how to deadlift and things too, because that's one of those maneuvers that my kids, when they're 4, 5, 6 years old, whatever, when they're bending over to pick things up, they have a tendency to round their back and just put it all onto their spinal discs instead of actually bending their knees and squatting down to pick things up.
Yep.
So I even try to teach my kids. I think it's such an important move. I'm glad you started young.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was going to say, we started with our kids too. I should start having them do deadlifts, but in order to get on their iPads, they've got to have their schoolwork done, do their chores, go to their sports, and then we make them do 15 push-ups and 15 squats.
That's awesome. Leverage, right?
Yep, absolutely.
My son, he's 5, and last year when I think he was 4. I mean, it was not approximately a year ago. Obviously, a full year ago he would have been 4, but he did this tractor pull. In Minnesota, they have this like bicycle, but it's shaped like a tractor, and then they add a certain amount of weight to it, and you just drive the tractor. Like pedal the tractor. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And it's called like a tractor pull competition, and it's a big deal here in the Midwest, in Minnesota. And my son did so well, he qualified for like the state tractor pull in his age category.
Seriously. That's awesome.
And of course he's like super jazzed up about it. So I leveraged that into getting them all doing squats. They were doing like 100 squats a day, before this whole tractor pull.
Get them built up. Get that strength going.
Yeah, get the quads, But anyways,
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's so cute to see these little kids on these tractors just putting their vessels just popping, their neck veins. It's ridiculous. Blood pressure. I mean, you have a gene where you potentially could get high blood pressure, but I really doubt you would have that. I mean, you never know, right? But
yeah, I've always had really low blood pressure. Even this year, I got tested in spring training. I was like, your blood pressure number was way off. I was like, this just doesn't seem right. And I had them. The same lady retested me like 3 times. I'm like, and it was off every time. And then I got retested the next day, and they're like, yeah, you're actually amazingly in a perfect range. I was like, yeah, I think something was wrong last night. But I've always had really good blood pressure.
Yep, not surprised. I mean, usually body weight's key, working out is key, training, that sort of thing. And bone strength, you actually have a gene that gives you stronger bone density. So if you get like a DEXA scan or something, they're probably in awe of your bone density.
I need to get one. I'll do that just to be able to say, hey, check me out.
Yep. No, so that's a good, I always put that gene there because, again, usually I don't focus on good genes, but a lot of people have bad genes in that category. And then you want to weigh in how many good genes do they have versus how many bad genes and try and figure out if they're offsetting each other. But you just have that good gene. And of course, the pain sensitivity we already mentioned. So if you want, we can just jump all the way back to the brain section at the top. I mean, overall, your athletic genes are phenomenal. Kind of expected that. I think carbs, as you age, of course, carbs are going to be a really key thing to focus on. If you have
you mentioned in here the keto diet.
Right, especially if you have acute joint pain,
It might be good just to do that anyways, just as I'm getting older. I'm not old, but just as I'm getting older.
Yeah, I mean, I do it, and I mean, we're pretty similar in age, and I cycle into the keto diet every, 6 months or once a year, somewhere in there. And I just do it for 6 weeks. And it's phenomenal. Like, the problem for me, if I do it too long, I actually lose my sleep cycles. My brain gets so amped up, I can't sleep. I do like 3 hours of sleep a night, and then I say, all right, I gotta get off this thing. It's not.
There's good and bad with everything.
Yeah, I don't even feel like it's a problem at the time. It's super motivating. I do a ton of writing, but I know it intellectually. I know it's going to mess me up if I keep doing 3 hours of sleep a night, so I pull out of it. But yeah, in the brain section, you got some great genes here. Generally, the first one I'm not worried about. CETP is an Alzheimer's risk if your triglycerides are high. Because you're training, I'd be shocked if your triglycerides are high.
Okay.
The next 2 relate to inflammation. Excuse me. And the MEGF10 gene It's an interesting gene because it's linked to Alzheimer's, but it's also linked to muscle development. And the key for that gene, I think, is exercise, right? It's one of these that links exercise and brain health. So in other words, for your brain to function optimally, exercise is super important. And you could say, well, that's true for everybody, and it definitely is, but for you, it's even more so, you know?
That's interesting. Like, so what does it mean? What do you mean by exercise? So one thing we always talk about with the Blue Jays is understanding language. When you say exercise, what are you saying by that?
Well, in this case, I don't think it matters. I think muscle development and muscle growth is the key because it's linked to that. So actually having muscle mass, you know, aiming to put on muscle mass. Whereas there are certain genes like a BDNF gene, which is called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Some people have an Alzheimer's risk if they make less BDNF. Now you don't, right? You can see that category right above this. But for people that make less BDNF, endurance exercise is the key because they've done studies and heavy lifting doesn't really bring up your BDNF, but endurance exercise does. So it varies based on your genetics here.
Okay.
But in your case, I think putting on muscle mass, anything that, you know, is aimed towards that is especially beneficial for your brain function.
So to make sure, like, I just want to make sure I'm hearing this right. So I can put on mass. I have the bone density to be able to do it. And what you're saying is to get yoked. Just to go out, just get as yoked as humanly possible. Perfect. Sounds good to me. Oh, and not eat carbs. So eat all protein, get yoked. My muscles can do it. My bones can do it. Done.
That's word for word what I said, yeah.
And if I don't do it, my brain won't work. Perfect.
Yeah, it's just not going to function optimally.
So I become a meathead when I don't work out.
Yeah, well, that's what's funny. You know, Joe Rogan talks a lot about this on his podcast, how his brain just doesn't work optimally when he stops working out, and everybody calls him a meathead, you know, but he's a super intelligent guy. You're obviously a super intelligent guy, and you know, and you were training hard. I like it.
You know, if you don't mind, you can say that again.
Yeah.
No, it's really
about
interesting.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah, exactly. No, I've always noticed like working out for me does make me tired, but I do know like there's that factor of it does reinvigorate me like an hour later. So like for the little bit I'm tired, but then it like reinvigorates me where I want to, and like I want to get work done after I work out. I tend to actually work out in the afternoons. Because it'll like actually make me a little tired after, and then after that I end up doing more work.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah,
it's so weird.
That's awesome.
It's so weird because exercising gives me energy. Like the second I exercise, I'm like the Energizer Bunny, go, 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 to the point where there's been times where David's like, I want to punch you in your face, so you just sit down.
Yeah,
That's why I want to punch her in the face. Only because of that. Only because she has so much energy. Guys, no other reason at all. I would never think of that.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, and you have those endurance genes too, Andrew. So, I mean, you can go, you know, a lot more. It's an advantage. I mean, basically when you do these scientific literature searches on those endurance genes that you have, it'll say like, these are commonly found in elite endurance athletes like Olympic runners, you know, things like that. That's the kind of stuff that you read about in the scientific research. So it's good to have those genes too.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like I don't have those genes, right? But I feel like I've learned to develop how to mentally do that, to where I train, I never stop. But it's almost like I train because I'm scared if I don't. Like when I was training baseball and when I was training and at Brent's and at Top Velocity, we keep going back to that because that's kind of like one of those big points of my career change. I always wanted to make sure I was the hardest working, the one that was in there the longest. A lot of times I opened the facility up, a lot of times I closed the facility down. But it was something that I actually had to learn to develop. It doesn't come naturally. And it's almost a fear. It's a fear in my brain that if I don't, I missed an opportunity.
Yeah, you can, I mean, it's amazing, you know, people with endurance, even with the extreme endurance genes, which again, you don't have, but, you know, you get these baseball pitchers, like what's the guy on the Tigers, he pitches faster and faster into 9 innings, and then in the 9th innings he's throwing like 98 to 100, really tall.
I think you're thinking of Verlander, but he's
exactly.
He's with the Astros right now. But yeah, no, that's
Right,
exactly
right.
the thing is he and Justin and I know each other, and we used to talk. I actually asked him once about this, and it's one of those things. He gets going, then he starts rolling as the game is going on, and he feels better in the 8th and 9th than he does even in the 1st.
Right. And I think that's because he's got these endurance genes like Andrea's got, but he's managed to train for power. And so he's basically tapped into both of those circuits, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I have to do a couple warm-up sets before I actually do my actual weight that I am, wanting to lift. And I'm totally fine with that. Like I can do 5, 6, 7, 8 sets and be totally fine. Where I'm wondering where it differs is, and I know this might be TMI, but when we have sex at night, like I am wide awake until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'm like, I hate having sex at night. Whereas the morning, like I'm all about it. And then I'm like, all right, I can conquer the day. And I literally could go out and feel like I could run the fastest 3-mile run ever.
Yeah, interesting.
And I want to take a nap, but
Yeah,
well, that's true. Most people. Well, I mean, I'm looking. So you did not have any oxytocin receptor issues, Andrea. And that might be like hormonal, like your oxytocin. What's interesting about David, he's the opposite. If you look on the next page, on the DNA profile, you see that gene that says OXTR.
yeah, I'm looking at it right now. The stress.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yep, stress and then OXTR. Sorry, I should have said stress first, but that's actually your oxytocin receptor, David. And this is where you guys really differ dramatically because Andrea is on one extreme on her oxytocin receptor, and David, you've got the other extreme, meaning you're less able to handle stress unless you get plenty of oxytocin, right? And then you get super chilled out. This is where like dark chocolate can really help. The oxytocin is the bonding hormone. So it might be something related to oxytocin. That would be my guess. Not to like overanalyze it because I don't know for sure. But that is interesting.
So you're saying basically like dark chocolate helps me if I get too stressed out.
Correct. Yep. I know people literally that inject oxytocin. Of course, I'm not suggesting you do that, but I mean, I'm in this realm of biohackers where people get pretty extreme. But anything that increases oxytocin when you're stressed out is really beneficial.
That's really interesting. I usually handle stress very well.
Right, and you've trained to do that, yeah.
But I'm always looking to improve, so I love it.
Well, and I don't want to jump, I don't want to skip over this gene that I did skip over, just if you don't mind backtracking for a second, because there's a gene called TAP2, TAP2. And that one, this is where I was mentioning gluten before, David, because, it basically, it's an Alzheimer's risk gene. It's not a super high risk, but it is a risk linked to celiac as well. So it's kind of a gene that's triggered by gluten. And so in other words, if gluten's giving you gut inflammation, it's also potentially giving you brain inflammation. And it kind of links those two things.
I've never heard of brain inflammation.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, you can get inflammation anywhere systemically. You get these little chemicals in your blood that, like, one of them's called TNF-alpha, one's called interleukin, one's called interferon. There's this whole long list of them, and they can just kind of cruise throughout your blood. So basically, if you get a cut, right, you get these, your cells start to secrete these inflammatory chemicals, these interleukins, interferons, that sort of thing, and that triggers your immune system to attack. It tells your immune system to eat stuff. You know what I mean? Like if you've got bacteria coming into that cut, your immune system is there ready to just chew those bacteria up, those viruses up. The problem is if you don't have a cut and you've got those chemicals in your bloodstream, whether that's in your arteries or up all the way up into your brain, those chemicals are saying, they're telling your immune system to attack, but there's no bacteria to attack, so they start attacking your own cells. Does that make sense?
That's interesting. I mean, it makes sense. I've just never heard of that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a really good book called Grain Brain. It was a New York Times bestseller. It's David Perlmutter's the author. He gives a lot of talks at a lot of the same conferences I go to and whatnot and speak at. And it's a real strong argument for this connection between gut issues and brain health, grain sensitivities, gluten sensitivities, brain health. And it's really interesting, Grain Brain, if you really want to dig into it. But
Yeah,
the
we're
point
writing
is,
that down right now, and I'm definitely interested in that.
yeah, you should check it out, especially with this gene, you know what I mean? And that's why I didn't want to skip it over because, with Andrea's gluten sensitivity, if I remember right, Andrea, you're pretty grain sensitive.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it does make it easier if you guys are both mostly off the grains because, I think in the long term, it's better for your brain, David. And again, once in a while, no big deal, right? It's just the constant, hammering your gut with those glutens and the grains probably, is going to lead to an issue.
So should we start with our kids then too? Since we're both plus.
I did. Yeah, well, you're plus in a different way though, right? Because for you, Andrea, I think it was more gut, and for David, it's more brain.
Gotcha. We had the same one.
You could try.
It was the TAP2, and then I had some other
got that
ones.
one as well?
Yeah, we're both plus on that. So, and then I had.
You're right. That's a pretty rare gene. Yeah. In that case, I would probably try it. I mean, I do with my kids. They're pretty much gluten free. It's really funny to hear like my 2-year-old talk, like asking if it's got gluten in it. Like, does that banana have gluten? Like they have these funny little questions. But what's interesting with my kids, I notice a massive behavioral shift if they get a bunch of gluten and a bunch of grains. Like it all of a sudden you get all the tantrums and the emotional outbursts and things like that you literally don't get. I mean, my kids are pretty even most of the time, as long as they're exercising and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's made a huge difference there for me. So I would at least try it from that perspective and look at it from the emotional perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, it's good to know because I feel like my older son is always getting headaches. And and I just, everything that he is going through now, at 7, 8, 9 is, I feel like the same exact way I was at that age.
Yeah, sure.
So
interesting.
Yeah, no, it'd be good. He would for sure listen. The other one, I think, likes pizza and brownies too much.
Oh yeah, everybody does. I do. Yeah, pizza is my favorite food, and I'm super gluten sensitive.
There's some great. I actually think gluten-free pizza tastes better than some regular pizzas now. I mean, they've come such a long way. Yeah.
Right. The thing is, like, there's certain restaurants, like in the Twin Cities, there's one called Pizzeria Lola that I really like. It's like a Korean pizza place. And they use this wood fire and the whole thing, and you just can't beat it going out at a place like that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So David, with caffeine, shouldn't really be an issue. You're kind of a plus minus, meaning, you don't burn it super. Oh no, you're plus. So it stays in your body longer. I'm sorry. I was looking at the caffeine anxiety gene.
No, that's me. That's me that's plus. David,
you're plus in a different way. Well, you're plus in a different way. Yeah,
gotcha.
because I think, and I was getting a little bit confused too, because I've got 2 reports here. But Andrea, you eliminate caffeine super quick. David, you're the opposite. Like, it stays in your body super long.
And I've definitely noticed that. I have to time my caffeine. Like last night, we were enjoying some. It was Cinco de Mayo last night, so we were enjoying some adult beverages, some margaritas, and I threw a little caffeine in there at like about 7 o'clock. And I always know I have to time it. If I take it after 7, I know I have to stay up late. But I try nothing later than like 5 or 6. I know I have to, and it still messes up my sleep.
Yeah, I'd probably shoot to try and keep it in the morning, But it does depend on how much you're working out and all that. I mean, you said in your email you take like a a pre-workout called P4. What's that?
It's something that generally, like right now, that's really the big pre-workout in Major League Baseball.
Okay.
We pretty much all use it. It's I think it's 150 milligrams of caffeine for one scoop. I always only take one scoop, and so that's usually my pre-workout. We also do some it's called Amino Energy. It's 100 milligrams, and it's also got amino acids in there. But I take a good group of amino acids along with that stuff, and creatine. I've actually started increasing my creatine intake based on some of our nutritionist recommendations.
Wait, so how did you know that? So I have the same one, the CYP1A2 with the RS.
Exactly.
So
well,
how
the only
did
reason
you?
I put that as a plus is because it's on the other extreme. It's not bad. Neither of them are really bad necessarily.
Well, I was gonna say, how'd you know the difference? How'd you know that I metabolize it quickly and he doesn't?
Oh, because I wrote it on there.
Oh, gotcha.
I mean,
Okay.
I coded, so I made my own software here, right?
Okay.
And so I coded it such that if your body burns caffeine really quick, it comes up as a plus, but if it burns it really slow, it comes up as a plus, just because I think both of those extremes need to be noted. It's not bad, right? Neither of them are necessarily bad. You just want to kind of work with your body on it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
Interesting.
one of those rare situations where, right, I have the exact same gene down as a plus. just to confuse you if I do a family, right?
Yeah, no, it's because we both had the plus on it, but his stays in his body longer and mine, obviously metabolizes quickly, but I was just curious how you were able to distinguish the difference.
Right. No, it's just purely because I coded the software to spit out that little thing about it staying in your body longer or burning really quick. That's all.
That's a really easy excuse. Great work.
Yeah,
I mean, you came up with that right on the spot.
Well, I did make the software, so nobody can rip off my software because I made it,
Yeah, you got it. That's
Well,
good stuff.
and then thanks. Yeah, the last category is lifespan. You've got great lifespan genes. Just the one gene issue that you have here is that sirtuin gene, SIRT. Andrea had this one as well on a plus. In the 90s when they discovered this gene, I remember it, because I was doing all these research classes, these science classes, biology, all this. And they thought it was going to be the cure for aging because when they increased sirtuin, which is this gene, SIRT stands for sirtuin, when they increased it in mice, they were able to massively improve the lifespan of mice. So, basically the version that you have has less sirtuin. So that's associated with less lifespan. But the thing about the curing, quote unquote, curing aging, obviously they didn't cure aging, right?
Yeah. We don't think
They thought they were going to, though. I remember it being a big deal because they thought, well, let's just keep going. Let's add more sirtuin and more sirtuin and more sirtuin, and then pretty soon aging won't even exist. It doesn't really work that way, of course, we know now, but it does help to increase your sirtuin a little bit. And that's where the resveratrol comes in, or the grapeseed proanthocyanidins. I know I talked about this with Andrea.
Okay.
So just a good supplement for long-term longevity, health span, lifespan, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Does the red wine
recommend
help him too?
Yeah, exactly. It's the exact same gene. Yep.
But on the flip side, red wine gives me a lot more sugar.
True.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which triggers the
Well,
inflammation.
Right. And plus, I think you need like 100 glasses of red wine per day to really hit the amount of resveratrol that you need to really increase your lifespan.
We can all have our goals. I like that goal.
Right.
I'll be in the middle of working out, taking some wine. So perfect.
Yeah, you got that Gatorade, the big plastic orange Gatorade thing.
Yes.
With a spigot on the end. Well, yeah, so that's the brain section. Overall, really good. Should we switch to diet, or did you have any questions on that section?
No, I think that section actually, I think you hit it really clearly, and it, I'm taking notes as we're going. It just really, it seems to me, obviously pay attention to that gluten, make sure I'm working out, dark chocolate if I feel stressed out, and really kind of pay attention to that grape seed and try to find places where I can put that in.
Right, you got it. Yeah, so the diet section, have you ever tried melatonin, like for anything?
Yes.
Like for sleep or anything?
Yeah, for sleep,
What do you
I take
experience?
it. I
Oh, you take it
experience
already?
generally good sleep on it. I try not to take it too much, and I really don't try to take like the full, whatever, 10 milligrams, whatever the little bottle is.
Yeah.
I generally take about half, and what I try to do is, my issue is like just the beginning part of the sleep. It's usually not in the morning, it's at night, just helping me like get to sleep. My only issue is Andrea. Let me ask Andrea what the issue is when I'm on melatonin, because she usually doesn't enjoy that. I'm usually snoring a little too much for her.
Oh, he tosses and turns like a fish out of water.
Oh, wow.
And
Interesting.
it drives
Maybe
me
my
bonkers.
daughter has too much melatonin.
But when I take it
Yeah.
though, I sleep really well, and I'm usually out like a light.
Right.
So whenever
Yeah,
I'm like,
because
I'll say this, I also have like restless leg syndrome, or like if I do drink alcohol at night, I do like, especially beer, I'll have issues with my legs. I'll just always be like bothering me. So I'll take some melatonin, or if I work out too late, I'll take some melatonin, and that does help me, really help me get to sleep. But I sleep really well, but I guess to her, I always like, I'm snoring and I'm moving around a lot when I do that.
Sure. Well, it doesn't surprise me that, I mean, I'm not sure about the tossing and turning part. Maybe you need some more electrolytes. That might help. In general, magnesium before you go to bed probably would help. But I like the melatonin because you have this first gene that comes up in your diet section. It's a risk for higher blood sugar, and it's actually your melatonin receptor, which is, it seems like really discombobulated, like completely, oh, there's your dog, right?
Yeah, exactly. Anybody that walks by the front door, they're probably going to lose it here, because I think we have a UPS delivery that's about to drop off, and they're really
no
good
worries,
protectors of the door, and then they're like the
Right.
babies once you actually walk in the door.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, do your thing if you need to grab the door.
Andrea's
But I
on
was
the
gonna
move.
Oh, good call. Yeah, so I was going to mention this melatonin receptor. Basically, taking melatonin actually helps you with blood sugar.
Interesting. That helps me with my blood sugar. Mm-hmm. So you're,
Yep, so
wow.
most people think of it as like purely a sleep thing. I don't know, it's just linked to insulin sensitivity. So it's actually good for your joints too, right? Because we talked a lot about insulin in the joint section. So there's some aspect, and I don't totally understand it, but I know it's been researched and studied that in your case, right, with this version of the melatonin receptor, taking melatonin actually helps your body deal better with blood sugar, better with carbs, irrespective of all the sleep benefits and everything else. So I like that you're taking it.
That's interesting. So you did write on here, usually like 1 milligram per day, 2 hours before bed, or up to 10 milligrams per day. I can't take it during the day. I mean, that's just it just will put me out.
Right.
But
Right.
if
No,
I am
just when I say per day, I just mean before bed.
right before bed, and if I take it 2 hours before bed, my bed will end up being 30 minutes before that. So
Oh, yeah?
yeah, it's
Oh,
like I
interesting.
take it in 30 minutes. I am like, man, I'm like, I can
Groggy.
start feeling it. I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna close my eyes for a second here, and I'm out. And it
Good.
really helps me.
Well, that works. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny because apparently your natural melatonin production, it starts to rise steadily like 2 hours before bed. So that's why they say to take, well, I guess it takes your body a bit to metabolize it too. So this goes back to your fast metabolism, right? Because when most people take it, it takes their body an hour or two to really get into their system. But for you, it's coming into your system really quick because your metabolism is so fast. That's just your gift, It's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you know that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you're on top of it, you're fine.
Yeah, and the hex gene, the next one, exercise is huge. I mean, exercise comes up again and again. Zinc is a really important one. That SLC30A8 gene, that indicates that zinc helps your body clear blood sugar as well. So, I would make sure you're getting enough zinc. Usually if you're just eating red meat, you're fine here.
I am definitely killing that one. We destroy red meat like it's
Ace.
like it's going out of business.
Good.
What
Yeah,
kind
now's
is
the time, right?
What kind of
go
zinc?
ahead.
Like zinc what is it? Picolate or whatever it is?
Picanolate.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah, pretty much any kind. Some people get, like, it feels like acid reflux if they take just, some of these zinc supplements. So usually I recommend zinc carnitine,
Okay, yeah.
just because it's a little bit easier on your gut, but it's not because it's better at the end of the day. It's just because it's easier on your gut. It doesn't make it feel or I think it's carnosine, actually, not carnitine. But again, it's on my website, like that AJ Consulting Company page.
Yes.
If you wanted to look up that one. But if you're eating red meat, like, it's going out of style. Yeah.
But I'm not doing it all the time, so maybe it's the days I'm not eating red meat. We eat red meat a lot, but again, we try to eat pork, we try to eat chicken, we try to mix it up a lot, so it's not like we're always red meat or anything. But when we do red meat, I mean, we're going to Fogo de Chao, and I'm setting personal records in there left and right. We go to Masters. I'm on a couple walls for steak eating and some records for steak eating, but we don't always do it. We've been having chicken the last couple days in a row. And so we try to mix it up a lot, but it might be interesting those days I'm not eating red meat to maybe supplement some zinc in there.
Right. Yeah, that's basically how I do it, actually. I always keep some on hand. And apparently it's good for COVID as well, especially compared to the previous SARS outbursts that they've had, outbreaks. I guess these, having zinc in your body is really, really critical for fighting off these viruses.
Isn't
not a rabbit hole I necessarily want to get way down into.
Isn't vitamin D good for that too?
Exactly.
And I think that's on his list.
Right, in the next section, yeah. Which we're
Don't
almost
let her
there.
skip ahead. Don't let her skip ahead.
She's done her homework. Well, I mean, we can skip a little bit here because I'm not too worried about type 2 diabetes with you because you're exercising. And, I mean, down the road, you might want to start in some intermittent fasting, if you slow down your exercise protocols because, it'd probably be optimized for you, but.
Yeah, I'll make sure I'm on top of that. I love breakfast, though. I don't want to skip breakfast.
Sure. Yeah, well, especially when you're training, right? You're training hard. But before we jump down to the vitamin section, I want to mention that heart disease gene called SOD2. It's on the next page. At the very top of the page, it says metformin.
Yeah.
And then there's a section that says heart disease from iron. And this SOD2 gene, and I'm just going to double check Andrea's. Yeah, you did not have this one, Andrea, so it kind of protects your kids. But it's not really a heart disease risk, so you're okay. But if your blood iron gets high, over the range, then it's a 10-fold higher risk of heart disease, meaning heart attacks,
Wow. Okay.
So it's really something to pay attention to. Basically, anytime you do blood work, you should check your iron. Just tell the doctor, hey, I want to know what my iron is, my ferritin.
What can I do to lower my iron?
If it's high, honestly, I would donate blood.
Okay.
That's by far the best way. It's a little extreme, but if you're okay with that, if you're comfortable, with the whole needle and all that sort of thing.
I hate needles, but I mean, it's one of those things. It's always in my head until the second the needle goes in my arm, then I'm fine. I make such a big deal out of it, but I know, I would have no problem with it.
Yeah, come on, David. You got that pain tolerance gene, right? You're supposed to be good.
Well, it's all in my head. That's a weird thing. It's all in my head, and then the second the needle hits my arm, I'm like, oh, that didn't hurt. I'm fine.
Yeah. Well, that's by far the most effective way. I mean, you could lessen your red meat intake and stuff. That usually drops your iron as well.
No, thank you.
But yeah, I mean, but again, it might not even be high, right? I mean, you're working out, you're pounding the weights, your metabolism's way up. Clearly, if you're burning your melatonin within 30 minutes. But I wanted to highlight that gene, right? Because most of these other ones are pretty minor. Again, if your triglycerides are high, you got some risk for plaque in your arteries, whatever. But, this one's pretty major. If your iron is high, it's worth keeping an eye on. Have you ever heard of hyaluronic acid as a supplement for your joints?
No, I've never heard of it.
It's a good supplement. A lot of people, it actually helps their joints heal. And you actually have a gene, HABP2, that's right towards the bottom of the page. And that's a fairly rare gene. I don't see it very often. And it's a hyaluronic acid binding protein that gives you a higher risk of artery plaque. And so I'd actually recommend getting some hyaluronic acid as well. Like try and find it as a supplement. You could do bone broth too. I don't know if you've ever done bone broth where you put a bunch of bones in a crock pot.
No, and Andrea's shaking her head, but I don't think I've ever done it on purpose. But exactly how does the how do you say it?
You had too much wine one night and you made bone broth accidentally.
My bad. Okay, so how does was it hyaluronic?
Yeah, hyaluronic.
Okay,
It's like
I'll just let you
high
say
five, right? Like, yeah, hyaluronic. It's actually a constituent of your soft tissue in your joints. Like it's actually a building block for your your meniscus. You know, people in their knee, they tear their meniscus sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like that horseshoe shaped soft tissue in between your bones.
Yeah.
That's a big component of the meniscus is hyaluronic acid. It's collagen, hyaluronic acid. So you're basically giving your body more of those building blocks. Now, for you, it's less about your joints, although of course your joints would get benefit from it too, I think. But for you, it's more about your arteries because it's actually a part of your arteries as well, just making your arteries more flexible. You know, when your blood's flowing through it, pumping, you don't want stiff arteries. You know, you want nice flexible arteries, and that's a component of this.
Okay, well, I'll definitely look into that. I don't know if we're going to be doing too many bone broths. We're not really that type of family, but that's really interesting. I would have to check more into that supplement.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, like I say, unusual enough for me to kind of flag and just mention it. And then, of course, the gut section lights up quite a bit, just like Andrea's. So you guys,
Is that not normal?
No, that's not normal to have this many genes in this category.
You've got more than me.
Yeah, that's interesting because I generally
disaster.
have like an iron gut. Like I can eat
Yeah.
anything.
Well, the crazy thing for you is most of these are NOD2, right? And they're pretty minor, as I mentioned, because I call them NOD2 minor, meaning they don't have that big of an impact, so it looks worse than it is. But I just did a podcast with somebody else, and they had like two genes that were plus minus in this whole category, no plus pluses, just to give you some perspective.
Thanks.
But the NOD2 is pretty much, I mentioned ketosis in there because it's a gene that makes something called inflammasomes in your gut, and they're as bad as they sound, right? Inflammation, inflammasomes. And if you're making too many inflammasomes, the best way to shut them off is ketones. And you can supplement ketones, or you can just go into ketosis. And, you're probably going into ketosis while you're sleeping if you've got decent blood sugar and you're training as hard as you are. But if you have gut issues, I would go back to keto, like a strict keto diet, like I mentioned before.
Yeah, and what is the key? We're familiar with the keto diet. What is the the big key to keto diet for people that are out there that might not know?
Well, I think it's just not getting too much protein. And it does depend on how much training you're doing. But most people, when they do keto, they do too much protein, and your body can convert protein to sugar. You can't convert fat to sugar. Like there's proteins, carbs, and fats. Those are the three macros. And you can't convert fat to sugar. There's just no way for your body to do that. So if you eat a bunch of fat, your body either has to store it as fat or burn it as energy. But with protein, you can actually convert that over to sugar and just keep burning sugar. So the pitfall a lot of people have with keto is they do way too much protein sometimes, and then they're not actually doing keto because their body's still burning sugar.
Is there a certain level of protein where that starts applying that, or is it just individual?
Yeah, it's super individual, especially for somebody big and beefy like yourself and who's training hard. I mean, you're obviously using more protein, so you need more protein. So that's pretty much a tough question, But you can measure ketones. You can get a breathalyzer, like a ketone breathalyzer, which is kind of funny. You just blow into it and it tells you how much ketones you have. You can also do like a finger pricking thing. That's what I do. It's kind of like the gold standard where you stick your finger and then you take a tiny drop of blood, put on this meter, and it actually measures how much ketones are in your blood. So there's a couple options there.
Okay, that's interesting. That's really different. I've never even heard of that.
Oh yeah, like you've seen them do that with blood sugar, right? Like people with diabetes, they do this all the time. They prick their finger and then they check their blood sugar a couple times a day, which is kind of depressing because kids do this, right? Like kids with diabetes, they got to prick their finger all the time, and it's like, if I do it for like 3 or 4 days, I start to hate it. You know, I can't imagine doing it for like years and years. But you know, once in a while, if I go into ketosis, I like to do it for that, just to see what I'm doing. You know, see how my diet's working for me. But yeah, I mean, most of these genes, to be honest, Andrea had these as well, so we went over them. So I don't want to go too long on those. Do you mind if we switch over to the vitamin section?
Yeah, let's rock it.
Yeah, so vitamin D, of course, comes up right off the bat. And, you know, you're down in Arizona, you're getting out in the sun, right?
Yeah.
Or you're sitting in the front office.
Well, I get in the
Working in
sun.
the front office
When I'm in Arizona, we're out in the sun a lot, out by the pool, hiking, you know, taking the dogs for walks. I always, you know, have the shirt off trying to get tan. And then when I'm down in Florida, I'm in the sun a lot. I'm on the field a lot. But on the Sunday, when the only day we have off, I usually always go like paddle boarding or I'm on the beach or something.
Perfect, yeah. So your vitamin D levels, I mean, have you ever checked your blood work and looked at your vitamin D?
Not to an extent with a focus like
not
this.
Recently?
No.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I have the numbers here for you. I would suggest either next time you get your blood work or if you have a big stack of past blood work, just look at it, make sure you're in the optimized range. It will vary in the winter versus the summer, if you're out in the sun a lot, if you're not out in the sun. But you might need to supplement, you know? Like, your genes are a lot more problematic in this category than Andrea's. And usually it takes a little bit of supplementation to get optimized here.
Okay.
For what it's worth. But, you know, not that hard to do. And the sunshine's always the best. And then
and I love the sun, so I'm always in it.
Right. Most people that have that, yeah, those vitamin D gene issues, they always love the sun. Seed oils, you avoid seed oils for the most part, like soybean oil, canola oil, that kind of thing.
So the grapeseed oil, that doesn't apply, or is that a contradiction?
I would avoid that one as well. Andrea does pretty well with that, but I would suggest for you not to have that one. I would stick with the fruit oils, I call them, like the olives are fruits, avocados are fruits, coconuts are fruits. Or butter. All that's good.
When I cook, which is extremely rarely, I always use avocado oil. Andrea's the cooker in the family.
Perfect.
I've gotten a lot more into it, but Andrea cooks all the time, and we use avocado oil.
Yeah, I think that's the key here with this one. I'm not too worried about the organophosphate pesticides in your case, but sometimes they fog the public areas with mosquito sprays in Florida with those organophosphates. And your body just doesn't clear those as well.
Okay.
As well as it should. So that's kind of the trick there. FAM9B, so you switch over to the sex hormones like testosterone. You have a gene that oftentimes lowers testosterone, but nothing is known about that gene.
Why is nothing known about it? That doesn't sound too encouraging.
It's super irritating for me because usually, you know, it's actually called family with sequence similarity 9-member B, meaning like we don't know anything about this gene, so we gave it a generic name. But, you know, I don't have any great solutions on obviously how to fix this gene if I can't, because there's no research on how it causes a problem, other than to say, you know, like as you age, watch your testosterone. You might need to get on some cream or something down the road. Although training and muscle mass, super preventative against low T. I mean, do you know your testosterone numbers?
I don't actually. It was really interesting. I think it was yesterday, the day before. I talked to my wife, I talked to Andrea, and I was saying, hey, like, I would just like to know this. It obviously raises questions with what I do, working in professional baseball. There's issues there, but there are ways. If you talk to the doctors, they test you, and if you have like a problem, they can, you can always get solutions for it. But it's not one of those things I can't just go out and grab some cream and just start applying it because I'm going to get drug tested.
They would think that.
and I was
Sure.
always really careful about that as a player. Never touch anything I can't take.
Right.
It's a little frustrating now, even though I'm not playing. I still have to be really careful of that stuff.
Yep. Yeah. They probably would be concerned that you'd pass it along to other people.
I have a random question. So I saw you said Americans are so low, they've adjusted the normal range to include people that are suboptimally low in testosterone. Why do they do so? I'm a believer in both Eastern and Western medicine. So I see like a naturopath, but I also see like a regular doctor or whatever. And I've known that for a while that the normal ranges, you could be in a normal range when it comes to, Western doctors, but then Eastern doctors are like, no, you're definitely too low or too high or whatever. Why do they do that? And why do you think that Americans are so low with testosterone? Do you think it has to do with like all the soy that's in food now or like all that stuff?
Yep. It's all these artificial estrogens. Like soy is a perfect example. Scientists all agree that soy acts like estrogen. Nobody disagrees with that. A lot of people argue about how much of an impact it has on your health, but it definitely acts like estrogen. And so does BPA from plastics and BPS and BPF and all these bisphenols. And there's a bunch of personal care chemicals that act like estrogen.
Is that the thing? Is that the study they did with the frogs? With the plastic?
Yeah, the atrazine, they did atrazine with frogs. It's like a herbicide.
Okay.
Like a weed killer.
Okay.
It's a weed killer they use on grains. It's a crazy story, right? So like the frogs, so in America, we allow 3,000 nanograms per liter of atrazine in our drinking water. Just remember the number 3,000, right?
Okay.
If you put a frog in 200 nanograms per liter of atrazine in water, you'll change a male frog into a female.
That's crazy.
At the level at 200, yeah.
That's crazy.
So if you live in an area, it's super crazy because if you live in an area where they're spraying a lot of atrazine and it leaches into your drinking water, you could have crazy high levels, and they call it male feminization in the scientific research studies. It's obviously a huge component of male feminization is lowering testosterone, right? Because women have totally different numbers than men in testosterone. So yeah, that's, and so what happens is if our whole culture has lowering testosterone, they just lower the range. They actually have done this they're trying to do this with puberty right now because girls are going into puberty younger and younger and younger for the same reason, because they're exposed to all these estrogens. They're actually arguing in scientific research journals right now about how they're saying we need to lower the normal range for puberty because everybody's, coming in abnormally low and we want to call that normal. That's what they do. They just basically
you adjust the numbers,
have some publications and they just drop it.
That's crazy.
It's not good.
Yeah. I always thought it was from like the plastic or the rubber, because I know that like the rubber material that's used in like artificial grass, where they did a study where those soccer players were having a certain kind of cancer that played indoor soccer.
Sure. Yeah, that's different chemical. Like the cancer risk is completely separate than the estrogen stuff generally, except breast cancer.
How do you spell?
Because breast cancer is rising too.
Yes. How do you spell estrogen? And how do you find what the levels are where you live?
There's a website called EWG. EWG.com or .org. I think it's .com. And you can actually look up, like if you Google EWG water levels in my area and then like list your hometown. Must be .org because I just tried .com and it didn't come up. Yeah, it's .org. But it'll actually tell you, and atrazine, by the way, it's spelled ATRAZINE.
Okay.
Atrazine.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Yeah, and it'll tell, like Mayo Clinic where I live, Rochester, Minnesota, it has, I think, 7 chemicals that are above the government's own recommended limits.
Wow.
7 of them.
Wow.
In other words, their water's terrible. Most towns have like 1 or 2,
Okay.
which is still bad, right?
Yeah.
You don't want any chemicals above the government's limits because the government's limits are a little bit high on a lot of things, really high on some things.
Yeah.
So if you're above the limit, then you're really in bad shape.
Wow.
So I have like a whole house filter on my,
Yeah.
I filter all my water coming in.
Yeah, I was gonna say we do too. And then, but then the back,
Right.
but then the back part, the backlash to that is that the fluoride and then, cavities and all that stuff. So it's like, where's that
Yeah,
balance?
but that gets right. Well, you get fluoride from food, so as long as you're eating healthy,
Okay.
it's not as much of an issue as they make it out to be. I know a Harvard researcher who he's been skeptical of this whole fluoride in the water thing since the inception. He's been going nothing but water and an electric toothbrush for the last 20 years. He's never had a cavity in his life.
Wow.
And I know a lot of people like that. He just happens to be really prominent because he's at Harvard and he's a professional scientist. But, and I stay away from fluoride as well because fluoride can screw up your thyroid.
Okay, interesting.
So low levels are good, again, which you get from food. But if you get too high, there's a lot of issues that come from it, which is like a whole separate topic, obviously.
Yeah.
But, it's an interesting topic. A lot of that fluoride research back in the 80s where they basically pushed fluoride into the drinking water on everybody.
Yep.
The research was super sketchy. I'll give you one quick example, right? Because they did a study with cow teeth. So they pulled out they have these cow cadavers.
Yeah.
And just sitting around. So they take out the teeth and they put them in water with like acid water, And then of course the teeth degrade. And then they put them and they took x-rays and they had a group of teeth that were in acid water with no fluoride and then a group of teeth that were in acid water with fluoride, right? Two groups. And the ones with fluoride, when they took x-rays, they argued that they were more protected against degradation, like the teeth stayed intact more.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
And then they used that study to basically argue that we need fluoride everywhere. That was like one of the fundamental studies. But what's crazy about that, they've gone back and redone that exact study with higher doses of fluoride and better technology now. They call it tomography. They can actually take it's like a topographic image of the tooth enamel. And they found like the fluoride doesn't even help.
Huh.
Like they were totally wrong back in the 80s with the x-rays.
That's crazy.
And it's even higher doses that they tested in the most recent study. And now a bunch of scientists have come out questioning these population-based studies. Like you can look at towns that have fluoride in the drinking water and look at towns that don't have fluoride. And there's literally no difference in cavity numbers if you look at the big, vast majority of these towns. If you just pick out a couple towns here and there, you can make a case in either direction. But if you look at enough towns, you find there's no difference.
That's crazy because I know they still push at the dentist's office like a fluoride brush or what, like a seal, a fluoride seal.
Yep. I know, and I've gotten discussions with a lot of dentists about this. But if you find ones that know enough about the research and actually dig into it, they're just taught that in dental school. It's just like doctors are taught that everybody should be on statins to lower cholesterol, But then that lowers your sex hormones like testosterone. It's not great, but they're just taught that in med school.
Yeah.
So they usually don't know the research. They don't know all the nuance. And when they do, they're usually kind of surprised.
Yeah.
But
this is fascinating. We could talk for hours and hours because this stuff fascinates me.
I know,
So I'll let you continue going on with David's thing. But thank you. I appreciate that.
So,
well, I did some YouTube videos on estrogen, but on fluoride, excuse me. And that's how I know, because I dug into the research. I wanted to know because I have kids, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, do I want them to have fluoride in their water or in their toothpaste and all that?
Yeah.
Because I've never had a cavity in my life either. I've never had a cavity, and I ditched fluoride probably 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and I've still never had a cavity. So at least from that, my little experiment hasn't hurt me.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's fascinating. It's all interesting. And I was gonna say, I got my first cavity like a year ago myself.
Oh wow.
So yeah, but then my oldest son has a ton of cavities. So
Sure.
yeah, it's interesting.
Right.
Well, anyways.
Do you guys do any magnesium? Do you take magnesium?
I do, yes. I've got my list that I take. I'm making notes for David, and I'm like, okay, got zinc for him. I've got magnesium for him. I've got resveratrol already for him.
Resveratrol.
Yep,
You got it.
exactly. So we're David's in good hands with me as far as the supplements on hand to start tonight. So, anyways, I'll let you get back. So hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to change the subject too quick. That was actually incredibly interesting with all that. But to go back to testosterone, this is a question I wanted to ask. One concern of mine that it's always been is, what's the best way to get it tested from like a reputable place? So one of my biggest concerns is you hear about all this testosterone tests, all this like go get your testosterone tested, like go to all these like male places that can help you. But I feel like a lot of those places are basically just going to set you up for testosterone treatments regardless. And they don't necessarily have the best interests of the patient in mind, just basically to sell it. What would you suggest as like or like, I don't know if there's a mail-in place or something that I can just get it tested just to find out before I go take that next step?
Right. Well, I mean, you could, like Quest Diagnostics or, like these giant testing corporations.
Okay.
Like you can just, like if your doctor orders a testosterone test, you can just go to them. They don't have any bias or anything like that. Like that's what I do,
Okay, that's smart.
And what you want to do, the thing is you want to do your total and your free testosterone. You have to do both.
Okay.
You don't want just your free testosterone or just your total. You kind of want those two separate blood tests. But I mean, you can do, there's a website called privatemdlabs.com. And apparently, like, they have doctors on staff that will basically, you decide what blood tests you want, and then they'll test them for you, but you still got to go into a clinic and get the blood,
And that's privatemdlabs.com.
Correct. That's another alternative, but I think it's pretty much comparable to just going to your doctor and going through Quest Diagnostics,
Okay.
Yeah, but again, you definitely want both of those. You want the total and the free testosterone. And, you're probably pretty good. I mean, your estrogen genes are pretty good, right? Because you have a couple in that category on the next page. But they're kind of yin-yang, where you've got some genes for high testosterone, but then you've got that bottom one. ESR2 is a gene for low excuse me, I said testosterone, I meant estrogen. You have genes for high estrogen and low estrogen, so they probably offset. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So I'm not really worried about your estrogen necessarily, especially because you're training and,
Yeah, and it's the couple
you got muscle mass.
the ones that are high estrogen. Like I love broccoli. I've always loved cauliflower. We do Brussels sprouts. I've always been that weirdo that ate Brussels sprouts as a kid, and I love it now.
Good. Yeah.
And kale. Like we probably do a kale like a fruit like a juice every other day.
Right. Yeah, those are all brassicas. Yeah, and that probably really saved your testosterone, That's probably really kept it high.
It was funny. It was actually, I've always liked that stuff. And then, again, like goes back to Brent Porcio. He was the one that really pushed making sure I was getting like a really good juice of like basically all that stuff in a good juice, and not even knowing the stuff. Right. But he said, basically for your training, just make sure you're on top of this stuff.
Right. Yeah, he's a rock star. He's a cool guy. Let's see, and then the thyroid, of course, you got some stuff there. Iodine, right? It's pretty much that simple. I'd probably check them as check your thyroid hormones as you age, but I mean, I don't want to get too caught up in the weeds there. I mean, plus I don't want to exhaust everybody, but but I'm going to skim a little bit here, but there's a gene on the next, is it the next page or the next? 2 pages down, there's a B12 category. It's like the bottom of the next page.
Yes.
And what's funny, right, is Andrea, I recommended supplementing B12 or eating a lot of red meat. But in your case, you've got phenomenal B12 uptake, right? So you definitely don't need to supplement in that section. And do you take a multi? I can't remember. I mean, I should pull up your email here. But
I do.
But you said you do take a multi.
When I'm in Florida at the facility, I take a multi. When I'm not, and I'm here in Arizona, I don't just because I just don't have the availability unless I buy it. There, it's kind of provided for you, so you just take it.
Sure. Well, because most of the multis, they have this fake version of vitamin E called tocopherol. And for you, that's the next gene under B12. It's in the vitamin E section, plus GSTP1. And tocopherol for you will actually increase inflammation, increases something called interleukin-6. which is not good, obviously, right? So I'd be careful with the multi and just make sure avoid tocopherol. Look on the label, make sure it doesn't have tocopherol.
Yeah, and
If it has tocotrienols, which is like a good form of vitamin E, then go for it. Otherwise, I would just avoid it.
okay, that's really interesting. Any brands that really don't have that, like any of the major brands that have the good vitamin E?
The good one? Not that I know of. I mean, there are definitely brands out there because I buy them, you know? But I just buy the tocotrienols separately. I know it's obnoxious, right? Because the words are so goofy. Tocotrienol, tocopherol, they're spelled weird. It should be like vitamin E1 and vitamin E2 or something.
Just make it simple for the public. Why would you do that?
Yeah, especially for a vitamin. But since it is what it is, I would literally just like print this page or put a star by it and just check the multi that they offer you and if it's got tocopherol, I'd avoid it. It's not worth it. That's one of the reasons they do a lot of times they do these multivitamin studies and they publish research papers saying there's no benefit to multivitamins. It's because a lot of people get inflammation from them and then other people get benefits, and then when you average it all out, it's kind of neutral. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's and you're one of those guys where you're going to get inflammation from it, so just avoid them.
That's really interesting. That's a weird one. You would have never thought going into this.
Right. Well, that's why we're here. And then finally, fructose, pretty much the last gene in this category. You've got a gene where fructose, your liver wants to store fructose as fat more than burn it as energy. So be careful with fructose. And that's a lot of fruits have, like bananas, super high in fructose. Be careful with those, for example.
What? Bananas? Oh.
Yeah, be careful.
And the kids' fruit
You can do
snacks.
the berries.
No, don't. Okay. Obviously, Andrea told you to put this on here because this is BS. That's really weird too. Like I didn't like bananas until about 5 years ago.
No, not even.
Maybe
2
6.
years?
No, it was like 2014 was the first time I remember eating bananas. I always hated it, but I started noticing that when I started training a lot harder, I started wanting bananas, or you know what it was too. I think I read somewhere that it was something good to eat before you go to bed. It was like a good snack that isn't going to bother your body too much, because I'll go to bed
Potassium.
at 1 a.m. after a game, 2 a.m, and I want something, but that's not going to bother me.
Right.
But obviously,
Well, I'll
I
tell you what,
was
super
ruining it all along.
Well, no. Well, it's interesting too because you know what people say about bananas? They have high potassium.
Yeah.
And skip down to the sleep section just for a minute because your sleep genes are pretty phenomenal. But there's one called ABCC9 that you have there. Sorry to make you jump all over.
No, we got it.
And ABCC9, that's a gene that it's actually a potassium channel. Like it's really dependent on potassium. So your sleep is actually really improved if you make sure your potassium is optimized. And so bananas are, interestingly enough, you're getting potassium from bananas, so it might actually help you sleep, but that's less because it's not because of the sugar in there, it's because of the potassium.
Don't sweet potatoes have more potassium than bananas?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. There's a lot of things with a lot more potassium than bananas, but
Coconuts too, right?
I'm not sure actually. I'd probably just look up like potassium-rich foods on Google. There's a lot of them, right? A lot of the plants. And I would avoid the ones that have a lot of fructose and a lot of sugar. I mean, broccoli has a lot of potassium, but
Yeah, I'll eat broccoli before I sleep if that makes you sleep better. And I got to eat it anyways.
Yeah, for you. Right, for you it should. And the berries are good too because they have, I'm not on the potassium subject, but back to the fructose subject. They have pretty low fructose compared to most of the fruits.
Okay.
So I would lean in that direction.
So berries,
Like those pills.
just like strawberries, blueberries,
blackberries.
blackberries.
You got it, yep. Yeah, blueberries might be a little bit higher, but the blackberries, raspberries, strawberries are all pretty good. And I link that website, like that web link there is actually my website. And I've got an article about fructose, back to the fructose section. I actually had a woman from Romania on a consult not that long ago, and she, super skinny woman, right? Like like slender little woman, and she had been diagnosed with a fatty liver. Like her stomach hurt. So she'd gone into the doctor and he diagnosed her with a fatty liver. Like they'd done scans and everything. And because she was a vegetarian and she was eating loads of fruit because she thought that was healthy. And she had this gene that you've got where basically her liver just wants to store that fructose as fat. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
So not a great, like you never want a lot of fat in your liver.
Yeah, I don't think that would be a good place.
Yeah. So, but yeah, of course we went over the gym gene. So, I mean, the last section is the sleep section and you're so good in there. I think potassium would probably be the most important thing. And, you know, even so, that's just a plus minus gene. And so is the other one in this category. So I'm not really that worried about them. I think taking magnesium is just based on what your symptoms were is also good. That's always good. Most Americans are super suboptimal in magnesium, deficient in magnesium.
The last thing again with the fructose, I know to jump back, I just thought about this.
Oh, yeah,
Would you suggest I've been eating, of course, in the mornings. Lately, I've been doing an apple and a banana and then like a protein bar before we go like hike or work out like right in the morning. Should I begin avoiding those things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apple and banana, and what was the other one? Just those
well,
two?
it's like a protein bar, like a 1 bar.
Oh yeah, the bar is fine. I would switch to like apricots or cantaloupe or, like I say, some of those berries that I mentioned. Peaches even are lower in fructose. Like they have 2 grams per peach, whereas apples have 10 grams per apple of fructose.
Interesting. I love all those too. So
yeah, I would just go to that website link that I have on that thing and just look down the list and just pick out some, you know.
perfect.
Because there's a lot of good options. Yeah, if you want to get that glucose, you know. But yeah, I mean, like I say, the sleep section looks good. So I'm pretty much all set on my end. Of course, we could jump back if you want to go over anything else or if you had any other ideas or thoughts that you wanted to go through.
No, this has been incredible. I've been taking 2 types of notes here. One, obviously, on what you tell me, like on the sheet. Another one, basically, on things to focus on. And I'm down to 20, so I got 20 things to focus on. But what's really, it's
That's it, huh?
well, that's it. But I love it, man. These are the type of things that help you really focus on your body. Like honestly, we're all shooting in the dark until you start doing something like this. And with something with me where I want my body I'm always trying to get better. I'm always trying to prove it. I'm trying to, the old adage, bigger, stronger, faster all the time. But I'm also trying to focus on my athletes, on my players, on the Blue Jays. Like, how do we get these guys better? How do we take care of their bodies better? Right. Doing things like this is the difference maker in really understanding the individual athlete and how we can really attack that athlete's needs. Because it's so easy. We have, over 200 players in the system to just, whitewash everything, just do one thing. Everybody just do one single thing. Mm-hmm. And it's going to work for some, and it's not going to work for others. And the ones that it doesn't work for, we're just going to go, it didn't work. But stuff like this is the individuality that really helps.
Right. I couldn't agree more, man. That's where the medical system needs to go in general, The doctors even oftentimes say the same sort of thing. Like they lament the whole system that we have right now as being too broad, and just kind of treating everybody the same.
Yes.
And instead of individualizing, like they call it individualized medicine, it's a better, even in the medical system, it's a better direction to go,
No, without a doubt.
It saves money. It's more customized. Yeah.
Well, that's what it needs. That's what the body, that's what people need. And that's, if you're doing stuff like this, at the end of the day, you're going to need to go to the doctor less. You're going to need to go to the hospital less. You're taking care of your personal needs, which takes it off of the system for the people that actually truly need it. And it costs you less money because then you end up actually doing what you should be doing in the first place.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Is Andrea still there?
Yeah. Yes, I am. Yes.
Any final thoughts from you, Andrea? I mean,
I
appreciate you sitting in again. We had so much fun the last time.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun. It was interesting to see the comparison between the two of us.
Now you guys can do you can have like a little competition and go through them and see who's better.
Yeah. Well,
on all these categories.
Well, this actually, I've been telling him that he should go gluten-free because, well, I'll have like gluten-free beer every once in a while, and he now started drinking it, but then he'll go back and drink regular beer, and his nose gets all stuffy. And I've been trying to tell him, like, hey, I guarantee it's the gluten. And so maybe now he'll finally listen to me.
Yeah, I agree. And as you age, right, you become more sensitive to genetic issues, so it'll become more and more necessary, I think. So that's good advice. I love it.
So, no, I appreciate you letting me sit in during his podcast and being a part of that as well. And I'm excited to, go over mine versus his and figure out where we can improve with, our workouts and our nutrition and everything.
Well, good. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. And David, of course, if you don't mind just maybe uploading that file to Dropbox and just emailing to me or something like that.
Yeah, no problem. I think what I'll try to do is I'll try to do it through just normal Gmail, and then I do that'll be the Google Drive. I've had better success with that than Dropbox in general, but because I think it's because like my Dropbox is full. But
yeah, that'll do it.
let me know. I'll send it. Let me know if you got it. Either way, we will make sure this gets to you. And again, I appreciate you taking the time. I know it went long, but it goes long because it's so fucking good, and it's so important.
Well, and you guys are thanks, and you guys are super interesting, obviously, and
Don't
I want
her
that
too much credit.
Jeez. Well, yeah, people are gonna love to hear your story and all that extra background information that we had at the beginning, and all the health stuff on top of that. I think most of my audience is pretty strict health nerds, but I think the more people, the broader the audience that listens to it, the better.
Well,
Everybody will appreciate your stuff.
well, that's the thing about it is this applies to everybody. This isn't like when I did a podcast and it was baseball and it was sports and I have there's a demographic. This demographic is everybody, especially the athletes or people that have concerns that need to be on top of things. Honestly, if you're not an athlete and you're not somebody with deep concerns, you should still be on this. Like it's still like there isn't a box. There is no group unless you're just a group that just doesn't give a fuck about anything and doesn't care what happens in their life. Everybody else checks the box, and this applies. And so when I listened to you and Brent, and obviously I got to sit in with Andrea, it might not be crazy interesting, but it doesn't have to be. It might one person might not think it's interesting. I did. I thought it was amazingly interesting because I know the ramifications. And if you don't do these things, that's when you go, oh, why does this bother me? Why does this always bother me? Well, it's bothering you because you never actually cared. And now, or you never actually knew the information. Now you do.
Found out the root cause. Yeah, right.
And what's the difference? Like it costs, the cost to do this, in the long run, you end up saving money like hand over fist and time and life. And your lifestyle gets better. That's, for me, lifestyle increase, there's no amount of money that shouldn't ever be an issue.
Yeah, I agree, man. Well, thanks. It's super glad to hear it. Super glad to talk to you, and stay in touch. If you have any issues, whatever, send me a text. I guess what you do.
Absolutely, I would love to, and if you do text, right?
Yeah. Sometimes.
No, and
if I'm not out fishing,
right? I'll thoroughly admit this. I'm actually not that great about always staying in touch with people, but please, if anything comes up, anything you hear, like anything you want to talk about, just send a question.
Okay.
Anything, if you get in touch with ball players or whatever, if anybody needs a referral, like if they're like, oh, well, who'd you do this? Come on, I would love to. And I appreciate you taking the time and going through this with me.
All right. Thanks, David. Have a good evening over there.
Hey, you too. All right.
All right. Take care, Andrea. Take care.
No, well, our son had to.
She already.
Yeah, he had to come in person to help.
Perfect.
So. All right.
All right. Well, tell her I said thanks to her.
I definitely
Yep. Take
will.
care.